Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternities, how I would write Game of Thrones Season 7 Part 3. So this is the third and final part in my series where I say how I would do Game of Thrones Season 7, which the actual Season 7 I was not happy with, so I'm doing my version. How would you actually make this season good, which it wasn't, and so this is how I would go about making it good, me personally. So part 3 will cover the final 3 episodes, episodes 8, 9, and 10, which yes, there should have been an 8, 9, and 10 in season 7, so I'm definitely fixing that. So this version will cover that. You should not watch it if you have not seen part 1 and 2. You should go watch part 1 first, then go watch part 2. I'll put links in the description below, so you definitely need to watch those first before watching this one. This is just my final part. Anyway, let's get right into this. Cersei. So after the Unsullied take King's Landing, Jaime insists all hope is lost and they need to surrender. These scenes have like a real Hitler's final days feel to them, as Cersei knows they're defeated, but she still refuses to give up. But we see Qyburn whispering something to Cersei, and she gets a devilish look on her face. Daenerys then tries to attack the Red Keep with her dragons, and Qyburn uses the well-coordinated Scorpion weapons to kill one of her dragons. Cersei then, in a very badass fashion, says, "Now!" and wildfire begins erupting all over the city, killing the Unsullied in key places. It kills a lot of civilians too, but Cersei doesn't care about that. The Lannister forces, led by the Mountain, then burst into King's Landing amongst the chaos, killing the remaining Unsullied, and we get a few badass Franking Mountain moments as he rips people in half with his bare hands and whatnot. And a lot of these battle scenes, although nothing too outrageous, that can be like a full battle episode like Battle of Bastards or anything like that. Nothing as expensive or time consuming, but just key battle moments to show this battle of Cersei retaking King's Landing, mainly focusing on Franking Mountain ripping people in half, and just a few shots here and there that show that the Unsullied are being killed everywhere. So Grey Worm gives the order to pull back, and Daenerys' forces leave King's Landing, and they end the siege. So, you know, in my version of the show, you might have noticed that Cersei is in a much, much weaker position. It's making it clear that Daenerys has won over all the kingdoms and that she has her surrounded as one little place. And I think the show didn't want to do that because they wanted to show that Cersei was still a badass, that she was still a good villain. But I think you can still show that she's a good badass and still a good villain, still someone who's not easily defeated by doing something like this. Even though she's surrounded, she's cornered in this little thing in King's Landing, she is still able to fight back and kick back, and killing one of her dragons is quite a huge deal. Plus, it makes the introduction of the Scorpion Ballista means something. Like in the show, they had Qyburn introduce the Scorpion, and I saw that as Chekhov's gun, but then Bronn tries to use the Scorpion and counts to nothing, like to shoot Drogon, but he's fine. So so Chekhov's gun was a dud. In my show, Chekhov's gun fires. It's useful. The Scorpion Ballista means something, which is why I waited to a bit later to introduce it. Daenerys. So we see Daenerys, Jorah, and Grey Worm at the siege of King's Landing, planning. Jaime apparently failed to convince Cersei to surrender, so Tyrion suggests that she give him more time, but Jorah implies that this is another case where Tyrion is letting his family loyalties get in the way, and says it's now time for Daenerys to show her true strength. So she takes her dragons and attacks the Red Keep, which starts out well, but Qyburn, studying history and how the Dornish managed to kill a dragon, expertly lures her dragon into a trap and manages to kill Viserion. Daenerys immediately falls back. Of course she would. And then Cersei, through well-timed use of wildfire, sets off chaos in the city. We get a few scenes of the Mountain being a total badass, fighting off the Unsullied with Lannister forces supporting them, where they push the Daenerys' forces out of King's Landing. Meanwhile, Euron does sneak attacks, drawing Daenerys' naval forces away, and slowly starts to pick them off one by one. So Daenerys moves all of her forces back away from King's Landing from a very safe distance, so they're no longer having a siege, but they keep the surrounding area surrounded so that Cersei's forces still can escape. So yeah, so just building off what I said before, shows that that Daenerys is her conquest defeat Cersei is not as easy, and of course this is a much better way to kill her dragon. Anyway, Arya, Sansa, and Bran. So Arya then confronts Sansa directly in somewhat an adversarial manner, but very contrary to the ridiculous scene where she threatens to kill Sansa and wear her pretty face and play the game of faces or whatever. She leans more towards working things out after her talk with Jon. And that's why I think it's important to introduce Jon into Winterfell. So Arya has a motivation to work with Sansa, because in the show it just comes off out of nowhere because it happened off screen. And I know they did this to try to shock you, but what it does is it makes it seem out of character, it makes it seem unrealistic, it makes it seem unnatural. Here we see the progression. We see how Arya goes from not trusting Sansa and wanting to get rid of her to slowly starting to trust her. So we need to see that progression. So we see that here as when she encounters Sansa, she's being very adversarial, but with a tinge of wanting to work together because of what Jon said to her. So she starts by going into Sansa's room wearing the face of the serving girl, which Sansa thinks she is, but then Sansa screams when Arya takes the face off. So Sansa gets defensive, thinking that Arya is going to pull a knife on her and kill her, but instead Arya pulls out the letter and throws it at her and says that here, you can have it. So sort of a way to reach out an olive branch. So Arya then tells her about her encounter with Littlefinger, where she tried to kill him and he saw through that and had threatened her with contingencies. So, and Arya also explains to Sansa her faceless abilities, which Arya kinds of gloss over, and Sansa will be a bit confused and wanting to hear more about, but Arya is focusing more on Littlefinger. So Arya will say there must be a way where they can work out amongst themselves, amongst the Stark family, because they need to work together, just like Jon said. So Sansa will agree, but is still not convinced that Littlefinger is such a big threat as Arya is making him out to be. So Arya will suggest going to Bran and asking him about Littlefinger, since he has all these psychic abilities. So they do. They go to Bran, and in a very visual scene featuring images of the past, using green sight abilities, big montage thing, we see everything Littlefinger has done, from betraying Ned to starting the War of the Five Kings to killing Lysa. So Arya pulls out her knife in anger and says, "I'm going to kill him," but Sansa grabs her wrist and smirks and says, "Wait, I have a better idea." So this is something we needed to see. It happened off screen apparently in the show, which is BS to the extreme. As I said, we need to see this progression. Having the shocking twist is not a good reason to sacrifice good character development, good character story. Any first grade writing teacher will tell you this. Sam. So, on their way north, Sam and Gilly stop by an inn where they hear whispers about his father and his brother's death, and Daenerys now controls the Reach, because, well, of course he'd find out about this. It's ridiculous to think he'd get all the way up north without hearing about this. It's big news. Anyway, Sam he's desperate about hearing about his father and brother's death. He decides to stop by Hornhill. There, a Tarly soldier bearing the Targaryen sigil waits for him and hands him a scroll. In that scroll, it states that the Tyrell line has ended, and Cersei had made the Tarleys the Lords of the Reach, so Daenerys intends to honor that decision, and since Randall and Dickon are dead, that would make Sam a Lord Paramount of the South. I know a lot of people disagree with me doing this, but I think it would have worked. Anyway, Sam knows that this is Jon was with Daenerys, so he knows that this was Jon's doing. And Gilly is excited and happy for him, but Sam's not so happy. It's like, oh, Jon, why would you do this to me? And of course, Jon was the one who suggested to Daenerys that they make Sam Lord of the Reach. So Sam insists he still needs to go north because that's where he's needed. He can be Lord of the Reach for whatever, fine, but he still has to go north. But now that things have changed, Gilly and her baby can stay in Hornhill where they'll be safe. But Sam has something to do first before he leaves. Jon Snow. So when they arrive at Eastwatch, they're joined by Dolorous Edd and Tormund. Because Tormund shows up saying that he wouldn't miss this adventure for anything. So now, this is my version of the Fellowship. As well, on the show I call it the hastily put together Fellowship, but you notice the difference is I don't hastily put it together. It's more natural because they just have Gendry show up and be like, I want to join, and they have them go into the jail cell and be like, oh, people bickering, oh, let's go north, blah, blah, blah. Hastily put together. And I call it the Fellowship. Some other people give other names to it, like Magnificent Seven or whatever, but I call it the Fellowship because the Fellowship in Lord of the Rings was made up of different types of walks of life. It had an elf, it had a dwarf, it had a man, it had a wizard, it had a hobbit, and so that seems like kind of what they were doing. They were putting in different people everywhere that kind of didn't seem to fit. And I think there's nothing wrong with the Fellowship in the Lord of the Rings because they established it. That's where the hastily put together part comes in, because it didn't make sense to have these different people. They didn't seem to fit together. They didn't establish them together like the Hound or Gendry or the Brotherhood. It seemed out of place. So my version is also kind of a Fellowship because it has Brienne and Podrick, it has Tormund, has Dolorous Edd, it has Jon, and it still has the Brotherhood and the Hound. So it's still kind of a Fellowship, but it's not hastily put together. It's more natural because most of these people are already north anyway. They're already heading anyway. Dolorous Edd and Tormund were already by the wall wanting to fight against the White Walkers. Brienne was already pledged to House Stark, so it makes sense for her to be there. And the Brotherhood had already been established, having this motivation to go north. So it all makes sense. Why would they be there? And this establishes them better. Anyway, there's also a lot of no-name Wildmen, Night's Watchmen, and Northern Soldier characters that go with them, including a Karstark soldier who was there when Robb executed his father, and he fought with Ramsay at the Battle of the Bastards, and he states outright that he doesn't like Jon Snow, but he agrees that he needs to set aside their differences in order to defeat the White Walkers. I think that would be a nice added bonus. And also, where all the bonus, the faceless character, the red shirts, as you may call them, is a lot more clear in my version that there are a lot of them coming with them. Because in the show, they just seemed to just pop up when they needed to be killed. And it wasn't very well established that there was more than just the main characters going with them. I'll make it clear that there's more than just the main characters going with them. And it's not just wildlings as it was in the show. As I said, there's Northern men, and there's also other Brotherhood, because you saw other Brotherhood traveling with Beric and Doors on the way north, so where the hell they go? They're there too. So we have so it's a big group of people, not just like the Magnificent Seven or whatever BS. Anyway, so they set out north of the wall, and we get more interesting character interactions. Tormund, of course, makes eyes at Brienne the whole way, and she tries to avoid him. They get into a fight with a small band of White Walkers, and they manage to defeat, but they suffer some losses. Thoros of Myr gets killed by a white polar bear, and they move on. So I'm keeping that the same, because that kind of worked. It's just shot better where it's better lighting and you can actually see it better. Anyway, they reach a village where Bran has foreseen the Horn of Winter is. And Jon sort of finds his way there by using the key phrase that Bran had given him earlier. So again, Bran being useful. But before they can react, Benjen Stark shows up with a small force of Children of the Forest, and he says that they've already found the Horn of Winter and they've already hidden it so the Night King wouldn't find it. But he wants to give it to Jon so Jon can take it south of the Wall, which would be beyond the Night King's reach. So I am introducing Benjen a hell of a lot earlier, so we can have a lot of interactions with established Benjen Stark rather than him just showing up out of nowhere to do a Deus Ex Machina and then promptly dying, which is some of the worst writing, but I'm not getting too much into that. So anyway, Benjen takes Jon to the cave where he's hiding it, and they retrieve the horn. Jon Snow. So Jon and Benjen have many good character moments where Benjen explains what happened to him and tells Jon that he knew he would amount to great things. Again, important character interactions that we need to see. Jon has been looking for Benjen forever, so we need more than just him popping up out of nowhere. You need to see them interacting, see them reminiscing, and see Benjen telling him what he has become now. Oh, by the way, Children of the Forest, yeah, not all of them were extinct with the Night King's cave. I'm kind of playing fast and loose here, but I think it's not too far-fetched to assume there'd be more of them out there. So anyway, they stop by the same village on the way back, which is a valley surrounded by mountains, only to find that the White Walkers had caught up to them and they have them surrounded. So a huge fight ensues where the Children of the Forest use their fire throwing and magic to try to cut off and deflect the White Walkers, but the White Walkers cut them off. So this is, rather than this being like an open field or whatever, this is more like a labyrinth with like a village with buildings, huts or whatever, and like surrounded by mountains and valleys and crevices, so a lot of ins and outs. So Brienne has a sword fight with the White Walker where she uses her Valyrian steel to kill it. Awesome scene. Maybe we'll get something like that in season 8, but in my version we get it in season 7. So Jon is trapped by the Night King and almost killed, but the Karstark soldier sacrifices himself to save him. Oh, the irony. So showing that they're all working together for the greater good. So Tormund trips and almost dies, just like he did in the show, but Dolorous Edd saves him, but then he is killed himself. So yes, Dolorous Edd dies. Another main character dies. Raise the stakes. Benjen says, hold on. Where am I? So Benjen leads them to a remote hut surrounded by mountains where he and the 3 remaining Children of the Forest use their magic to protect it, so the masses of whites and White Walkers just sit there and wait. So, rather than have them in an open field, an open lake, and in the middle of the Arctic, in the middle of winter, surrounded by, just like water might crack or whatever, and the whites, they don't like water, I guess. Instead of any of that BS, they're in a sheltered area where they have shelter from the cold. They can start fires, and they can hold up there, and they have magic that protects them. Some people might say, you're using magic, but I think magic makes a lot of sense. More sense than an unfrozen lake, personally. So, because why didn't the Night King swoop in anyway? I don't know. We'll get into that. And the point is, makes a lot more sense. Children of the Forest use their magic to protect them. Jon confers with Tormund and finds that they only have enough food and water to last 6 days. And that's if they stretch it. So it makes it clear that they do have food and water, because that wasn't made clear before. It also makes it clear of the time frame. So there's no no warp speed ravens, no teleporting, nothing like that. Because there's no way that Jon could have survived in that frozen lake longer than just a day or two. And I won't get into that. Now that's happening in my version. I'm making it very clear they can hold up there for 6 whole days. So Benjen says that he can contact Bran and send for help So he does. So using this green sight. But again, this is relying on sort of magic. But hey, it's a fantasy show. And some people were telling me I hate the fact Game of Thrones is fantasy just because I hated the White Dragon. No, I like fantasy. I like it when it's used well. And that's what I'm doing. Not fan servicey. Anyway, we'll get it. I'm using it well. Rather so Gendry doesn't have to do like a sprint across like miles and miles of land in the middle of winter to get to back to the wall to tell them to send a raven that has supersonic raven that instantly gets the dragon's den, and then Daenerys uses warp speed on her dragon. No, none of that. Benjen uses the green sight to contact Bran. So in Winterfell, we see Bran seeing Jon trapped, so he sends a raven for Daenerys for help. Again, Bran is actually being helpful. Ha ha! How about that? So, while they're waiting, we get some more character interactions between the characters, and they talk about how they're incoming death, that they're probably going to die. And then, the Night King finds a way to break through the Children of the Forest magic. And the remaining children of the forest sacrifice themselves so that the others can get away, and they run through this labyrinth of village to try to get away, but a few nameless people die. Now, rather than this being like an open field where why didn't the White Walkers or the Whites instantly kill them, there's no reason why they shouldn't have. Here, they have places to hide, crevices, things to hide in. It makes a lot more sense how they would get away. Also, rather than, oh, the Whites figure out the lake's frozen now, so now they can walk over, which is, so many issues with that. No, Night King finds a way to break the magic, makes a lot more sense. Again, I'm relying on fantasy, but this is a fantasy show, and contrary to what the naysayers say, I like fantasy. Anyway, when they get to a good hiding spot, Benjen tells Jon to take out the horn, and he lights it up on fire using magic and destroys it. So Daenerys then shows up and saves the day. And later, at the very end of the episode, we get a scene where the Night King is overlooking the shards of the broken horn, and he uses magic to reforge it. So, kind of my version of the Night King bringing the dragon to life. But rather than having a fan service dragon, rather than having the Whites go to White Walker Home Depot to get to get chains, and rather than having the white scuba divers put on their scuba gear and jump in the water to get out the dragon, no white scuba divers, no White Walker Home Depot. Instead, he uses magic to bring back the horn, which is probably, it explains, because you might have been thinking, well, if Benjen can just destroy the horn, why didn't he just do so in the first place? And this is why, because he knew that it might not work entirely, but it was a last-ditch effort because he thought they were all going to die anyway. He didn't know Daenerys was going to show up and save them, so he did that just as a contingency as last place, but it wasn't foolproof, which we see Night King brings the horn back to life. And now I want to get into the third major reason of why introducing the horn into the story is what other issue that solves. In the show's version, the Night King brings down the wall by using a dragon. How does he get a dragon? Because Jon and Daenerys gave one to him. So it's basically Jon, Daenerys, and everyone's fault that the Night King gets to the wall. So in the show, if Jon and Daenerys stayed at home knitting sweaters, then they would all be better off. Night King would have never gotten south of the wall. They'd be fine. That's BS. That is total BS. My version, that is not the case. The Night King would have gotten through the wall anyway. If they stayed home knitting sweaters, he would have actually gotten through the wall quicker. So they actually managed to be effective. Rather than giving the Night King the means to take down the wall, they actually stall him a bit, because he would have gotten the horn a lot quicker. At least they managed to break it up and stall him and give them time. So even though they fail, at least they tried, and it is not their fault that the Night King got south of the wall. Daenerys. So we get a few scenes of Daenerys in tears of her fallen dragon and pleading for Tyrion and Jorah to help But rather than being helpful, they just blame each other because Tyrion blames Jorah for telling Daenerys to storm the castle and saying that her dragon wouldn't die if he would have shown restraint. And then Jorah's like, oh, you're just trying to protect your family. You don't realize that. And they start yelling, blah, blah, blah. And Daenerys is like, shut up! It's both of you. And she's, of course, really distraught over the death of her dragon, something we didn't get enough of in the show. We get it here. We see actual tears of her being upset over her dragon's death. So Varys then comes in with word that Jon Snow is trapped and surrounded by White Walkers in the north and needs help. I mean, he might mention that's from a crippled boy who has a vision, but Daenerys is going to believe it because all she's seen with Melisandre and all she's seen, and she trusts Jon, she's going to totally believe it. But Davos pleads with her to go with him so he can go with her and to help Jon, and she accepts. Tyrion protests, saying, oh, you can't trust it. How can you trust this? Even if you do, this is too dangerous. You shouldn't go. But Daenerys ignores him, pretty much like the show. And Jorah also offers to come to help her, and she accepts his help as well. So Davos and Jorah hop on the dragon, go with Daenerys. So Daenerys arrives north of the wall, and Jon and surviving members of his team are just starting to be overwhelmed by the whites. This is right after the Night King overdid the children's magic, and so she's awed at the sight of the massive amount of whites and the White Walkers. So she swoops in, clears a path with the dragon fire, wiping out a whole bunch of whites. However, we see the Night King gather a spear, and he throws it at Drogon. You know, the dragon doing the most damage, the one with Daenerys on it, the one with the most people, should be his main target. Drogon, not some other dragon who's off doing nothing. He throws the spear at Drogon. Anyway, the spear nicks Drogon, injuring him, and Daenerys falls off into a pile of whites that start digging into her. So, I'm reversing what the show did, because in the show, the Scorpion Ballista just nicked the Drogon, he just fell and nothing happened. And the Night King used the spear to kill Viserion. I'm reversing that. So the Scorpion actually killed Viserion, and the Night King nicked Drogon, but ultimately nothing happens to him. He's fine. Because there's no such thing as the White Walker Olympics. There isn't. The Night King would not have this perfect spear ready to go and be able to throw it perfectly to kill the dragon. It makes him a Mary Sue. It makes him too unbelievable. It makes him an uninteresting villain, invincible, too powerful. Do not buy it. So that is not what's happening in my version, because there is no such thing as the White Walker Olympics. Anyway, Jon, with Benjen's help, fight their way through the whites, and they rescue Daenerys. So that's an interesting turn. Like, Daenerys rescues Jon, and then it shows Jon Benjen rescuing her. Meanwhile, they can see the Night King is readying another spear. So, because he's not perfect, because he hasn't been practicing at the White Walker Olympics, but he might get it right this time. So Daenerys sends her dragons away for their own safety, but that leaves everyone trapped there. So it's not as easy as, oh, we just hop on a dragon and go away. I'm going to make it a bit more difficult for them. So the White Walker forces have been severely weakened by the dragon fire, so they all can make it out on foot. We don't rely on the Benjen Ex Machina. We rely on the fact that she just roasted a bunch of whites and cleared a path for them to escape. But in order to stop them, Benjen, Beric, and Brienne offer to hold the whites off at a narrow passage so that the other goes away, so the others can get away. So these three offer to sacrifice themselves. So it's similar to the Benjen Ex Machina, but it makes a hell of a lot more sense. Plus, you'll notice I didn't have a scene with Jon falling into a frozen lake and coming out and walking miles through Arctic areas in the middle of winter and somehow not dying of hypothermia, which no excuses for that. I don't care if Jon being brought back from the dead, none of that, no excuse. So that doesn't happen. Jon can't magically fight off hypothermia in my version. So Benjen, Beric, and Brienne stay behind. So it's similar to Benjen sacrificing himself, but rather than just showing up out of nowhere and not riding off with Jon when he perfectly could have, there's a perfectly good reason why they can stop him, because there's a narrow passage that they can actually hold off. And Beric and Brienne also join in. So Brienne has a teary farewell with Pod, telling him that she believes in him before giving him Oathkeeper, and then she goes off to die along with Benjen and Beric. So, my version of the events. Brienne, Dolorous Edd, Beric Dondarrion, Thoros of Myr, they all die. Real stakes. So this quest up north means something. It's just not a bunch of red shirts and Thoros who wasn't that important. Real characters die. Real main characters, real stakes. So, a few other nameless characters also stay behind and sacrifice themselves so that Jon, Daenerys, Jorah, Davos, Podrick, Tormund, and the Hound, and a few other nameless characters, because we're not going to kill all the red shirts like the show did, they can make it away. So once they're at a safe distance, they hide in a little crevice, a little corner, and the Hound asks what they're going to do, how they're going to make it back to the wall. Also, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, by the way, during this, I'll just backtrack a bit. I know I'm getting a bit out of order, but at one stage, the Hound captured a White because he said, hey, it's going to be a good idea because the people back home, they're not going to believe any of this, so we need proof. And Jon's like, are you sure? He's like, trust me, this is going to work. So they have a White captured with them in tow. Notice how that's not their main motivation. I mean, I think they still need to do it. I think it still makes sense to have evidence, but that's not their main motivation for going up north, because it would be stupid for their main motivation to go up north. But since they're there, might as well collect some evidence. So once they're at a safe distance, they hide in this crevice, and Drogon and Rhaegal show up because they can, they had this telepathic connection with Daenerys that's been established in the show, so they can sense Daenerys is in trouble, and so they fly over to fly all the people to safety. So back at Eastwatch, Daenerys asks Jon if they completed their mission to destroy the horn, or to get the horn, and if they have the horn. But Jon says that they don't, but they destroyed it because it looked like they were all going to die, so they destroyed it so the Night King can't use it. So we get a similar scene of Jon in bed, where he pledges to bend the knee to her, and she pledges to fight the White Walker invasion, seeing firsthand how deadly they are, and she nearly didn't make it out alive, and if it wasn't for Jon, and she almost lost another one of her dragons. And so I know what the pushback for this is going to be, that Daenerys doesn't have as much motivation as she does in the show to fight off the Night King, because in the show, the Night King killed her dragon, so she's more motivated to get back at him. And maybe that's why the show did it that way, to put the emphasis more on the Night King than Cersei. But I think that's worth sacrificing personally, because of all the other issues it solves. And Daenerys still has motivation, seeing all those Whites and like being almost ripped apart by Whites, and being saved at the last moment by Jon, and seeing her dragon almost be killed by the spear. I mean, that still gives her plenty of freaking motivation, so I think it's good enough. Anyway, she's worried that if she withdraws her forces from the south, Cersei will just swoop in and retake all of Westeros in her absence. So she's still reluctant to just immediately redouble her efforts up north. So Jon mentions the White that they managed to capture, saying that they can broker a deal with Cersei to use this White to show that the threat is real, and that they need to get focus on the White Walkers to get Cersei to back down. Arya, Sansa, and Bran. So next time we see them is at Littlefinger's trial, where they never pretend that it's Arya's trial, and they outright present it as Littlefinger's trial. So he comes in prepared. So the accusing part is pretty much the same as it was in the show, but as I said, it's not a sneak attack. They just say outright. They accuse Littlefinger for doing all these things. And Littlefinger's response is totally different, because instead of weeping and pleading like a bitch, he fervently denies the charges. He points out the very true fact that they have no evidence, just the word of some crazy boy who claims to see visions. Otherwise, all of their evidence is circumstantial. Lord Glover backs up this claim, supporting Littlefinger, saying that Bran should be locked away as a madman and not listened to, and several other of the Northern Lords chime in their support. Now, in case you can't tell what I'm getting at here, Littlefinger has paid off these lords to support him, because of course he would. He's a mastermind. Anyway, so while the majority, led by Lyanna Mormont, side with Sansa, it leads to screaming matches. Lord Glover is dubious as he doesn't trust, Lord Royce is dubious because he doesn't trust Petyr Baelish, but he doesn't trust Bran either. So it's showing that the waters are muddied and it's not as clear as it was in the show, because of course it wouldn't be. So Baelish declares that there's not enough evidence to convict him, and Glover speaks up that he agrees that if Sansa did sentence him when there's not enough evidence, that he would pull his support for her. And many of the other Northern Lords agree, saying, don't kill. If you sentence Baelish to death, we are going to withdraw. So Sansa agrees to drop the charges. Littlefinger smirks as he walks away, because he's a mastermind. However, after you see Littlefinger leave, Sansa smirks as well, because that all went according to her plans. Sam. We see a small impromptu wedding where Sam marries Gilly in front of a small crowd, including his mother and sister. After consummating their marriage, we see Sam and Gilly talking in bed, where he says that she is Lady Tarly now, and he's leaving her in charge of Hornhill. She says she doesn't know the first thing about being a fancy lady, but Sam says don't worry, that his mother will help, and she'll know what to do and how to handle everything, but that Gilly and the baby will be much safer down here, and that he's going up north to ensure that the Night King never gets that far south. So we then see Gilly all dressed fancy with her son, and Sam's mother and sister as they farewell him as he goes north. Now this is a bit fairy tale-y, but I think it fits, and I think it's a fitting way to get Gilly and the baby off the show. Maybe that's why they didn't do it, because they still want her in the show, but really she's a bit of a distraction. So, and plus it's a good ending for her. It's a happy ending. She has the safety. She's now a lady. It's a good like rags to riches story. She was just a wildling. Now she's like the lady of a whole region. I like it. Anyway, Cersei. So we get a scene with Cersei and Jaime after her victory, where Cersei is acting all smug, but Jaime insists that it isn't a real victory because they're still trapped in King's Landing with nowhere to go, as Daenerys holds all the rest of Westeros. Cersei says that he needs to have more faith, and he asks, in what, the gods? And she says, no, me, and storms off. Classic Cersei. Daenerys. They return to Dragonstone with the Hound, Jorah, Davos, and Podrick, but Tormund will stay behind in Eastwatch. There they tell Tyrion about their plan, which he is totally on board with, so sends a raven directly to Jaime to arrange it. They all go to this meeting, as well as Missandei, Gendry, and Theon. Grey Worm stands guard with the Unsullied outside of King's Landing, just as he did in the show, except here he doesn't just appear out of nowhere from being in Castle Rock. Here, we know how he got there, and he actually had a journey. Anyway, they aren't all escorted by Bronn, because of course he's dead, and we get no interactions between the Hound and Brienne, because we got those already, and Brienne's now dead. She's not there. We do get the trailer for Clegane Bowl coming in Season 8. I'll be generous and keep that in, even though I thought it was a bit silly, but I guess it kind of works. Anyway, Daenerys makes the pro wrestling entrance on Drogon just as she did in the show. However, Missandei will most certainly announce her with 1,000 titles, because there's absolutely no reason why she shouldn't have. This is the perfect, if there ever was a perfect occasion for Missandei to announce Daenerys with 50,000 titles, this is it. So, Daenerys negotiates from a position of power, which of course she would, because she has the upper hand. Although I do make it a bit more clear in my version, but it's also the case in this show, so it made no sense for her to be acting like she's having Cersei have all the power. Anyway, Cersei talks about how it's not easy for her to sit with the usurper that stole her kingdoms away from her, but Daenerys retorts that it's not easy for her to sit with the person who killed her dragon, her child. But Tyrion shoots her a look, and she calms down, and she says that they're all there for the greater good. So when Cersei asks what the greater good is, the Hound brings out the white, and this goes pretty much as it did in the show. We even get the same scene of Euron freaking out and saying that he's going back to Iron Islands to hide. I actually had no issue with the white in the box thing. Some people had issue with it. I'm fine with it. I'm keeping that. Anyway, so Cersei then asks Daenerys what her proposal is. So Daenerys answers, there's no way that Cersei is going to defeat her. That is a fact. She already has the rest of Westeros, and by creating a stalemate in King's Landing, all Cersei is doing is forcing her to keep her attention down south when her attention is desperately needed up north. Not just for her, but for all living humanity everywhere. And the only thing that the stalemate is going to accomplish is ensuring that humanity is wiped out by the Night King. So her proposal is that Cersei surrender King's Landing, denounce the Iron Throne, and bend the knee to her, and in return, she will return Casterly Rock to Cersei and make her Lord Paramount of the Westerlands. And if she refuses, Daenerys will storm King's Landing and take it by force, regardless of how many have to die, because she needs to have this war over with. So Cersei outbursts in anger, saying that she'll see all of humanity dead. She'll see everyone in the Seven Kingdoms dead and all of humanity wiped out before she gives up her throne and gives up her kingdoms to this whiny little brat, and Cersei gets up and leaves. So this, to me, this makes a lot more sense of Cersei getting up and leaving rather than saying, oh, Jon's bending the knee to Daenerys. And by the way, in my version, Cersei's already aware that Jon's bent the knee to Daenerys before they get one. This isn't news. And I honestly don't think it's that big of a deal. I think the bigger deal is this proposal, which really upsets Cersei, because of course it would. The last thing she'd want to do is bend the knee to Daenerys. So, but it makes sense for Daenerys to ask her to bend the knee because she has all the power. Anyway, so Jon then goes to Daenerys and they start arguing and freaking out, and Tyrion tells her that she can't be serious about following through on the threat she just made to Cersei, but Daenerys makes it clear that she meant what she said, that if Cersei refuses the deal, she's just going to come in, storm the king, and take King's Landing. And Tyrion and Jon are like, but you know, the people are going to see you as a villain, you're not going to be a benevolent ruler, you're going to be blah blah blah. She says, no, I can't worry about my image. This is beyond me now. It doesn't matter if I remain queen or not. What's more important is that we stop the White Walkers. And if that means I have to sully my image a bit and some people are not going to like me, so be it. The more important thing is that we save humanity, which makes all the sense in the world. So anyway, Tyrion says that he can talk Cersei out of it. He can get her to follow the deal if they just let her speak to Cersei. So Tyrion goes off to speak to Cersei. We get pretty much the same scene with Cersei and Tyrion, except they actually discuss the matter at hand a lot more instead of just talking about the past the whole time. Although they do mention the past, but come on, they actually need to talk about the matter at hand. So Tyrion actually makes a convincing argument after he learns that she's pregnant on why living in Casterly Rock would be best for her. So Cersei comes out and agrees to her terms, but she doesn't offer to send troops north because it's obviously a deception. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, Cersei would never bend the knee to Daenerys, but it's part of a larger strategy, and I'll get to that soon. Cersei most definitely would lie. Especially when she's trapped and cornered like this, if she has a good strategy. Also, Daenerys, some people might say, oh, Daenerys would never, why would she give Cersei Casterly Rock after she just killed one of her dragons? Because Daenerys knows the importance, the real stakes involved. It's more about the Night King, so she's willing to compromise with this deal. Just like she was willing to sacrifice people thinking that she's evil in order to stop the Night King. She's also willing to give in to Cersei a bit in order to focus on the main threat of the White Walkers. So we get a scene of Cersei, Qyburn, Jaime in the mountain, leaving King's Landing with all the Lannister forces. So they're evacuating King's Landing, giving it up to Daenerys, and the Unsullied are standing at attention as the Lannisters leave King's Landing. So Daenerys then returns with her staff. Well, not to Dragonstone, they have King's Landing now. So they are now take up residence at King's Landing, and she has a meeting at the small council. And so they all plan to go up north. This scene pretty much goes the same as it does. We get an extra scene showing how close and Jon and Daenerys have actually grown. And yes, we get the boat sex on the way up north, but we don't get Tyrion creeping outside of the room while they screw. In addition, the boat sex will be more earned in this version, as their relationship was never that adversarial in the first place, and we get a lot more scenes that show rather than tell the natural chemistry that these two characters have. Cersei. So after the truce, we see Cersei and Jaime back in Castle Rock, and Jaime suggests that he send some troops up north to go help with the fight against the White Walkers, and Cersei calls him a traitor. So rather than the whole thing with Jaime getting the troops ready to go, and Cersei is like, oh, why are you a traitor? But not like, so she has a plan that she's telling them she's sending troops north, but not really, and she doesn't tell Jaime about this and is surprised that he's getting ready for it. That was dumb. So instead of this, it's Jaime's idea to send troops up north, and then she calls him a traitor. Makes a lot more sense. So Jaime points out that Cersei bent the knee to Daenerys, but Cersei says that that means absolutely nothing. She has no intention of giving up any of the kingdoms, that in fact, that little truce gave her the advantage she needed. So again, this is why she bent the knee, because it means nothing to her. It's just bullshit. She can lie, and she says it actually, because the truce works in her advantage, it gives her the advantage she needs, and she was trapped. She didn't have any advantage, so she sees one, she takes it. That's Cersei. So the rest of the scene plays out pretty much as it did in the show, except at Castle Rock instead of at King's Landing, because this is such a great scene between Jaime and Cersei. One of the best things about the end of the season. So Cersei tells Jaime again, you think I learned nothing from Father, and talks about how some of the houses in the Riverlands, the Reach, and the Stormlands didn't go to Daenerys willingly, and they have some lords that were burnt by her dragons, so which festers a lot of hatred for Daenerys. So she plans to send word to them and arrange to have them betray their liege lords, so houses loyal to her will hold each of these kingdoms. She said that after all, Father didn't defeat the Starks through strength of arms. So Jaime, appalled, asks if she's going to propagate more slaughters at weddings. And Cersei replies, weddings, funerals, tournaments, name day celebrations, whatever it takes to get the kingdoms back that are rightfully mine, which totally Cersei, and totally would freak out Jaime. So then she tells Jaime about Euron's plan with the Golden Company, that's keeping that the same, and Jaime makes the same protests about how they'll all be dead if they fail up north, and Cersei has the same retorts as she does in the show, so that goes the same. And then Jaime points out that they already abandoned King's Landing, but Cersei says, well, let the bitch have it. It will probably be a ruin by the time I'm done with it anyway. After all, Castle Rock will be a much more fitting place to rule the Seven Kingdoms. It doesn't have the stink of those Targaryen beasts. Not talking about the dragons, by the way. But yeah, I mean, why... King's Landing has Targaryen history. She's like, no, fuck that. We're going to build a new kingdom. We're from Castle Rock, which is a real place. So Jaime runs out, just as he did in the show, with Cersei threatening to stop him with the mountain, but not following through with it. Like, that was great, keeping that. So Jaime then goes to meet with a few Lannister generals who are more loyal to him than they are to Cersei, but they point out that it's only about 10% of their forces. But Jaime says that the rest of the generals can't be trusted because they're too loyal to Cersei, so he takes what allies that he can trust, and he heads north to aid them in the fight against the White Walkers. This would make more sense to me. In the show, it seems like he just went off by himself. It seems like he was the head of the Lannister army for quite some time. It seems like he would have some allies. Some people would be more loyal to him than they are to the person who killed a bunch of people in order to get the throne. Seems like that would not fly with a lot of people. A lot of people would trust Jaime more. So he has forces to take with him up north. Arya, Sansa, and Bran. So later, Sansa goes to Littlefinger's room, and he starts going off on a tirade about how he has no bad feelings and he can still trust her. And he tries to say that Bran is crazy, but at the same time sort of praising him. So saying stuff like, I know he's your brother and you love him, but, you know, and he basically just drones on, trying to get on her good side, while she says absolutely nothing. So Arya then walks into the room and brandishes a dagger. Littlefinger balks at this and says, huh, haven't we been through this already? You can't kill me. Sansa finally breaks her silence and says that Jon is no longer on his trip up north and so is no longer in danger. And I see now the snake that you are as you tried to tear me and my siblings apart, so I won't be trusting you either. Littlefinger then points out that he still has allies, and if he dies, there will be dire consequences for them. Sansa then says, oh yes, your allies. Thank you, by the way, for pointing out who they are to me. So I was able to go to all of them, and with Arya's help, motivate them to reconsider their support for you. I also now know who not to trust. So basically what she's saying here, the reason why they did the trial in the first place was a ruse. So this is now Sansa outsmarting Littlefinger. Even though Littlefinger's the mastermind, Sansa was one step ahead of him because she used that as a ruse in order to figure out who Littlefinger's allies are, because she was smart enough to know that he would have allies, because of course he would, and who people that he paid off. So she figured out who they were, so she went to, intimidated them with Arya threatening to kill them, and threatening to expose them, or threatening all this stuff, and got them to back down, and no longer support Littlefinger. So Littlefinger starts to panic, saying that he has other allies that she's not aware of, but Sansa can tell that the threat is hollow, and says that none of those allies are of consequence, which she's completely correct. So Littlefinger's just desperate now. So Littlefinger says that the Northern Lords won't tolerate them killing him in cold blood after they had already dismissed the charges against him. But finally, Arya steps up and says, who said anything about murder? You're going to have an accident where you slip and break your neck. So now is when Littlefinger gets on his knees and begs Sansa and tells her that he loves her, because now he truly has no options. Now it makes a lot more sense. So we got the previous scenes that does show that Littlefinger's not a bitch. He's a mastermind. He has contingencies. He has plans. But Sansa outsmarted him. Rather than just, oh, we'll just have this trial, Sansa actually has to work to get the better of Littlefinger, which is the way it should be. So Sansa says, thank you for teaching me a lot of invaluable skills. And then Arya swoops in, snaps his neck, killing him instantly. She then tells Sansa that she'll put the body somewhere where it can be found and it can be believed that he just slipped in the snow. Sansa nods and leaves. Later we get follow up on the scene where Sansa and Arya reminisce while standing on the wall of Winterfell, where Sansa quotes her father about the pack surviving, all this, pretty much the same. However, this time, this scene would have been earned. It wouldn't just be like in the show itself. It seemed like the two sisters hated each other, then all of a sudden they're working together, and then all of a sudden they're all happy after just threatening to kill each other. It was ridiculous. It made no sense. Now we see that, because this is why you sacrifice this, having the stupid twist. You show the progression of Arya's turn, of them learning to trust each other, them learning to work together. This is something you need to see. It earns the scene at the end where they come together and realize that the best thing is for the Starks to stick together. So, in the scene, it also starts with Arya telling Sansa that she was right. There are no consequences to Littlefinger's death. Everyone knew it was an accident, but nobody cares. Because no one would, because they already took care of all of his key allies that he paid off, and no one else really likes him. Makes sense. Sansa outsmarted Littlefinger. Sam. So Sam arrives in Winterfell, and he goes to Bran. And Bran tells him about Jon's true heritage, but, and this is all, again, all capital letters, 5 exclamation points, nothing about no damn annulment is mentioned. Bran saw Jon, but hasn't told him yet. He then goes back and sees, so he uses his green sight, and he goes back and sees that Lyanna and Rhaegar were in love, and Lyanna wasn't kidnapped by him, but went willingly. But nothing about a fucking secret wedding, nothing about Jon being named Aegon, for fuck's sake. Sorry. Anyway, so when Bran sees that Lyanna wasn't kidnapped and went willingly, Sam says that Robert's rebellion was all based on a lie. But Bran corrects him that it wasn't a lie. Even though they were wrong about that, they still had lots of reasons to go to war. After all, Rhaegar was a married man, and he betrayed Dorne, and Robert would still be upset with Lyanna running away. It's still a bad thing, but they just didn't have all the information. So knowing the truth wouldn't have stopped it. But they just didn't have all the information. So this is something that needs to be clarified that the show got wrong. Anyway, Bran and Sam agree that Jon needs to know the full story now, but Bran no longer knows how to relate to people because he's a robot now. So he hopes that Sam will know the best way to tell him, and so Sam agrees to help. So this is what earns the meeting between Sam and Bran. This is why they're talking to each other, because Bran needs Sam's help. Sam also mentions the books that he took from the Citadel, and Bran says that he needs to study them immediately so they know how they can prepare for the incoming White Walker invasion. Again, bringing it back to the White Walkers, bringing it back to the books, foreshadowing is important. The Night King. So the final scene of the season, we see Tormund out at the wall looking on as the White Walkers and Whites approach, and the Night King blows the horn to bring down the wall, but it's made clear in the shot that Tormund was not on the part of the wall that collapsed, so it's made clear that Tormund is okay. So the White Walkers then march on to Westeros. No silly cartoon dragon white Night King bobbing up and down looking like a putz. No fucking blue fire. None of that BS. We use the horn, bring down the wall. A lot earned, a lot better. I won't be upset and yelling about it in the reaction video. And of course we get into the final reason of why introducing the horn would have worked so much better than having the white dragon, and that is the most obvious reason, of course, because we don't have to have a white dragon, because that was silly, it was fan servicey, it looked dumb, it looked cartoonish, so get rid of that. Horn solves that. So just to recap, just as the 5 reasons why having a horn would be better. Number 1 is because it gives Sam something to do, something to find out in the Forbidden Books that's actually useful. Rather than Dragonglass, they can find out about the horn. 2, it gives Jon a good motivation to go up north. It saves Tyrion from looking like a moron or coming up with a stupid plan. 3, it makes the Night King bringing down the wall and the White Walkers invading Westeros not our hero's fault. The Westeros wouldn't have been better off if Jon and Daenerys stayed at home and knit clothes like it was in the show. They actually made a difference and delayed them a bit, so they were actually helpful in a bit, but it wasn't their fault. 4, we don't have to have White Walker Home Depot or white scuba divers with the chains and bringing out the dragons. Just if some people think I'm nitpicking about this one, it is just bad storytelling. If you just say, oh, just go with it, you just introduce crap out of nowhere that doesn't really make any sense. So with the horn, you don't have to have that. And 5, of course, you don't have to have a white dragon, which is, thank God. Anyway, that is it. that is my version of Game of Thrones Season 7, and as I said, I'm sure lots of people will strongly disagree with lots of versions, and I'm sure there's plenty of people who are going to think the actual Season 7 was better than my version, which is fair because I'm just some dude in my bedroom spouting out shit in my spare time. I'm not a professional writer, but for those of you who do think my version was better, or that Preston's version was better, or that any other versions were better, and as I said, you can post your own version in the comments if you like. That is sad that a lot of just fans, casual watchers, are able to come up with better versions than the actual writers. But hey, I'm still hoping Season 8 will be good. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll be doing another one of these for Season 8. We'll see about that. Anyway, so that is it for my Game of Thrones video. I will be back with more Game of Thrones videos. I did a lot more character analysis and stuff like that. I also do many other videos on my channels on shows like Star Trek, The Expanse, and Lost, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.